Sammy Gravano will say, there's an absolute rule. You don't talk about what goes on in the family.
He was very critical of Gotti and, frankly, any mob boss who sought out fame or the limelight or the spotlight.
But once you become a government witness, well, you've done it, and so you could write a book and you can talk about it. That's Sammy's logic.
He agreed to talk on the condition that we provide former FBI agents for his protection and not broadcast until he had dropped safely out of sight.
Here I am. The Mafia.
They have said you are the single most important witness ever to testify against the mob.
I think I am.
He testified against Vinny the Chin Gigante,
the head of the Genovese family.
I believe the security tab to protect Gravano during his days of testifying in Brooklyn was like $250,000. They had helicopters and getting him in and out of the court.
Gravano, who admits to killing 19 people, provided what the prosecution lacked, a first-hand account of Gigante's alleged mob activities.
And they won their conviction, but the families of the victims, people killed by Gravano, came in the court, to watch him testify.
Under cross-examination, Gravano acknowledged that he had been paid $250,000 to collaborate on his best-selling book, Underboss, and expected to get a percentage of a movie deal based on the book. That angered the families of his victims who were suing Gravano under New York's Son of Sam law, which prohibits lawbreakers from profiting from their crimes.
This is a man who based his life and his career on lies and deception. Why is he now all of a sudden a credible witness to anyone?
They were pursuing legal action to make Gravano literally pay for his crimes.
After Sammy testified in 7 trials, and he was going to testify in many more, he and his family, his wife, and his 2 children quietly moved to Tempe, Arizona, where he went under the name Jimmy Moran.
And he pulled himself out of the witness protection program. They wanted to live where they wanted to live, not where the program was going to put them.
He's going to be looking over his shoulder, but he just wanted to do it on his own terms.
They bought an 8-bedroom home with a 3-car garage and a pool. Sammy started a pool construction business.
And he was doing very, very well.
They opened a restaurant called Uncle Sal's that his wife Deborah ran, and its motto was, the best kept secret in Scottsdale.
But at some point, he's hanging out at the restaurant. He had a little reconstructive surgery done, but it really didn't change his appearance that much. He still conducts himself the way he conducts himself, and, people started catching on.
His true identity gets unmasked by a reporter from the Arizona Republic who tracks him down.
The Sammy in Arizona story gets national attention, of course. It spread all over the place.
Sammy thought he was okay, but he wasn't as safe as he thought he was.
You can understand why the FBI was so invested in Sammy. He had helped them put away more than 36 former mob associates.
We were prepping him for one last trial. We very much had an interest in making sure he played it smart and he stayed alive. Sammy was always protective of his son. He didn't want to see his son in the life.
He was so critical of Gotti for recruiting his own son, John Gotti Jr., to become a made member of the Mafia, and he felt this was terrible, that he would never do this with his own family.
But then, in late 1998, Sammy discovers that his son, Gerard, has been selling ecstasy pills outside of nightclubs in Phoenix with his best friend, Mike Papa.
His account of it was, Sammy catches wind of it, not real happy with what they're doing.
Sammy was not into that. He kind of looked down on the practice of selling drugs.
Here was the perfect opportunity to set the boys straight. But instead, he didn't discourage them. He mentored them.
It's fast money. It's easy money. He's going to try to recreate the life he had before.
And pretty soon, Gerard and Mike Papa were carrying guns and using Sammy's name to influence and intimidate other drug dealers. And Mike Papa beats up a drug dealer who has ties to Israeli mafia. Eventually, the 2 rival groups call a truce, and they sit down at Uncle Sal's, and Gravano says to them, I own Arizona. It is locked down, and you cannot sell pills here without going through me.
Not that he was innocent, but he was trying to ensure that his son and his family was protected.
So DEA in Arizona and police begin an investigation they call Operation Ecstasy. And they had some 11 wiretaps and bugs listening to him and his associates.
You would think he'd be smarter to have those kinds of conversations on a phone, but, you know, again, when you don't think you're doing much, you get stupid.
Beginning at about 6:30 this morning, 14 search warrants were served by 7 SWAT teams.
On February 24th, 2000, the DEA and Phoenix State Police arrest Sammy. They arrest his wife, Deborah, his daughter, Karen, his son, Gerard, Mike Papa, and 41 others.
We learned that the Papa Gravano organization distributed 20 to 30,000 ecstasy pills per week in the Phoenix metropolitan area.
And they estimate that Sammy and this ecstasy distribution ring was making $1 million a month.
I got the call and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. He couldn't be that stupid.
Gravano is back in the news, this time in Arizona, where he has lived the past few years after leaving the federal witness protection program. Gravano is charged with helping finance a drug ring that sold ecstasy, a so-called designer drug.
This is basically, in my history, Brian, this is a minor thing.
They're being held on a charge of conspiracy to distribute dangerous narcotics, which is a Class 2 felony in Arizona.
So the irony of him getting arrested, he may not see it this way, but it actually saved his life.
There was an elaborate murder revenge plot against him by Gambino family members. They were going to blow him up with a bomb.
And I think they came close to being able to get him. Then Sammy gets arrested and doesn't get out on bail, and it's the end of the plot. I don't think he really ever thought they would do it, but they did.
So after Sammy's arrest in Arizona on state charges, the New York DEA and Customs begins a joint investigation on him. In Arizona, they knew that he was dealing ecstasy, but they didn't know who his source was. In New York, they figure it out. Sammy was getting his pills from a New York wholesaler who had ties to Israeli organized mafia.
So they were both federal and state charges. The federal charges were definitely more serious, and they carried more time, for certain.
Gravano and his son Gerard go to court to plead guilty. But in fact, prosecutors were ready to put on a whole trial showing how Sammy created his own little mafia drug dealing syndicate in Arizona.
It appeared that the court was disappointed that he didn't utilize his second chance and that he was back in front of a judge on different charges.
The judge sentenced Sammy to 20 years in prison. She also ordered him on supervised release for the rest of his life.
It was important because we wanted to make sure that he was going to be convicted of something, anything.
I am pleased for the people that he has hurt in this crime, but I am not pleased that he got away with 19 murders, including my son.
He had to pay $420,000 to the family members to be split up between them. Sammy gets out from prison in 2017.
He lost his teeth, lost his hair, was put in solitary confinement, but he survived.
Sammy had changed a lot.
He had contracted Graves' disease, a very serious thyroid ailment. Gravano had always been a health nut. And here he was, gaunt, his eyes were popping. He had aged 50 years.
Ex-con, convicted drug dealer, mob rat, quite a resume.
Sammy Gravano, I think, heads with any wise guy. They're wise guys to the end.
Normal people obey the rules. This is somebody who did not and who lives to tell about it.
It's really ironic. He did a lot for the mob to make the mob strong, and he did a heck of a lot more to weaken the mob.
And in order to better himself at every stage, he did very evil things.
But he is still out there being Sammy Gravano, and he's going to take advantage of his reputation.
He's figured out a way to turn his past into profit.
He has a podcast, which he calls Cosa Nostra, Odd Thing.
I know part of the life is deception. In planning a hit, you're always doing something or saying something and you're plotting against the guy. But usually it happens 1, 2, 3.
There's a bit of a disconnect thinking, well, there's this friendly, warm guy. On the other hand, you know, he's a hitman.
There's a complete fascination with people who live fearlessly, kill people, doing it as part of business.
He's reliving those days. He's not hiding from who he was and who he is. But thank God he's not active in it, right? Because he was a force to be reckoned with when he was.